She never thought a simple afternoon coffee could change her life. But that Wednesday, as the rain tapped lightly against the cafe windows, everything shifted. Clara sat at her favorite corner table, stirring her chai absent-mindedly. Across from her, her cousin Daniel sipped on a black coffee, looking unusually thoughtful. They hadn't seen each other in months, life pulling them in different directions. Clara had expected the usual small talk about work and family, but Daniel's eyes held a depth she hadn't noticed before. "You ever feel like you're just drifting?" he asked quietly, breaking the silence. Clara blinked, surprised. "Drifting? Like lost?" "Yeah," he nodded. "Like you're moving through life without really steering it. I used to feel that way all the time, until something happened that completely changed my perspective." Clara leaned in, curiosity piqued. Daniel rarely spoke in such personal tones. His words had a weight she couldn't ignore. He began telling her a story from his early 20s, a time when he was struggling to find his purpose. He described long nights sitting alone in his tiny apartment, wondering if he'd ever feel truly alive. He admitted he had been anxious, lonely, and unsure if he would ever make a difference in the world. "But then," Daniel continued, "I met someone who completely flipped my mindset, someone I didn't expect, and it wasn't some big, life-altering miracle. It was just a small, almost invisible act that taught me the most important lesson of my life." Clara felt a shiver of anticipation. She loved stories like this, ones that didn't rely on drama, but carried truth in the quiet moments. Daniel smiled faintly, as if remembering a private moment only he could see. "I was walking home from work, tired and frustrated, and I noticed this old man struggling with his groceries. I didn't think much of it at first, but something made me stop and help. And when I did, his reaction, it wasn't just gratitude. It was like he had reminded me of something I had forgotten about myself." Clara tilted her head. "What was that?" "That life is bigger than my fears, my worries, and even my failures. That small act reminded me I could make a difference, even in ways I don't always see. And it changed how I approached everything: work, relationships, even how I treat myself." Clara felt an unfamiliar warmth settle in her chest. It was strange how someone else's story could make your own troubles feel lighter, like a shadow lifted just enough for the sun to peek through. "I think that's what made me realize," Daniel said softly, "that we spend so much time thinking we're alone in our struggles, but when we open ourselves up, even just a little, we discover a connection that changes everything." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain outside had slowed to a gentle drizzle, leaving behind a peaceful quiet that seemed to wrap the cafe in a comforting hug. Clara felt as if Daniel's words were echoing inside her own mind, unlocking thoughts she hadn't been able to express before. "Wow," she whispered. I never thought about it that way. It's like a tiny moment can have so much power." Daniel nodded. "Exactly. And that's why I wanted to tell you this. I know you've been feeling uncertain lately, and I thought maybe it could help you too." Clara smiled, feeling a mix of gratitude and curiosity. There was something about Daniel's story that didn't just make her think. It made her want to act, to notice the small moments in her own life that might hold the same transformative power. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. The two cousins sat quietly after that, sipping their drinks, each lost in thought. But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel's story was just the beginning, that something bigger was waiting to unfold in her life. She felt a flutter of anticipation, like the first page of a new chapter she hadn't even realized was ready to start. And in that quiet moment, as the last drops of rain slid down the window, Clara wondered, what if she could see the world differently, just like Daniel did? What if one small choice could truly change everything? Her heart was quietly racing, and she didn't know it yet, but the next few days would bring surprises she never imagined. Lessons about love, hope, and the courage to change her own path. The next morning, Clara woke up feeling a strange mixture of excitement and unease. Daniel's story from yesterday lingered in her mind, like a song she couldn't stop humming. She poured herself a cup of coffee, watching the sunlight spill across her kitchen counter, and thought about the small moments she'd overlooked in her own life. Her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "Meet me at the park in an hour. I want to show you something." Curiosity sparked. She slipped into her jacket and headed out. The park was quiet, the kind of early morning stillness that makes you feel like you've stepped into another world. Birds chirped softly, and the crisp air carried the faint smell of pine and earth. Clara spotted Daniel near the fountain, tossing breadcrumbs to the ducks. "Morning," he greeted, smiling. "Ready for a little adventure?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "An adventure? This isn't what I expected." Daniel laughed. "It's not dangerous, I promise, but it might change how you see things, again." He led her along a winding path, past flower beds glistening with dew, until they reached a bench tucked under an old oak tree. Daniel sat down, patting the seat beside him. Clara sat, feeling the anticipation tingle in her chest. "See that man over there?" Daniel asked, pointing subtly toward a man in his 60s, slowly walking along the path with a small backpack. Clara nodded. He looked ordinary, almost forgettable. "That's Mr. Harper," Daniel said. "He's been living alone for years, quiet, reserved. But every morning he comes here to feed the birds. He says it keeps him connected to the world." Clara watched as Mr. Harper scattered crumbs, then smiled warmly at the tiny gathering of ducks. She could see the care in his movements, the patience, the gentleness. It seemed ordinary, almost mundane. "See, here's the thing," Daniel continued. "Most people would walk past him and think, just another old man. But the world isn't about the big, dramatic moments. It's about noticing the quiet ones, the ones that make life meaningful." Clara felt a lump in her throat. It was true. How often had she walked past someone, lost in her own world without seeing them at all? She thought of her own grandmother, sitting alone at the window, and how she rarely stopped to really talk. Daniel leaned back, folding his hands. "When I first met Mr. Harper, I was frustrated with life. Work felt meaningless, friendships felt shallow. Then I watched him for a few days, and I realized, this man, just by being kind to birds, was happier than I was. He wasn't rich or famous or doing anything spectacular, but he had purpose, connection, and joy, and it made me question everything about how I was living my own life." Clara nodded slowly, understanding the depth of what he was saying. She had been rushing, always chasing, always striving, without noticing the small acts that truly mattered. "I started small," Daniel said softly. "I smiled more. I helped people without expecting anything. I noticed the beauty around me, and slowly my life felt lighter, fuller. It's amazing how much a tiny shift in perspective can change everything." Clara's mind swirled with thoughts. She remembered the smile of the barista who always remembered her name, the neighbor who waved every morning, the stray cat she fed without thinking twice. All those tiny moments, she had dismissed them as insignificant. But now, seeing them through Daniel's eyes, she realized they were the threads that wove a meaningful life. "I want you to try something," Daniel said, turning to her. "Tomorrow, find one small act, one thing, no matter how tiny, that brings someone else happiness, and notice how it makes you feel." Clara agreed, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement. It seemed simple, almost too simple, but if Daniel had learned something life-changing from a small gesture, maybe she could too. As they walked back through the park, Clara felt her heart opening to new possibilities. She thought about the choices she had been avoiding, the dreams she had pushed aside. Daniel's words weren't just advice, they were a doorway to a different way of living. That night, she couldn't sleep. She replayed the day over and over, thinking of Mr. Harper, the ducks, and Daniel's gentle smile. She realized she had been living in a fog, too focused on herself, and had forgotten the quiet beauty that surrounded her every day. And as she drifted off, she felt a quiet excitement. Tomorrow, she would try. She would notice, she would act. She would let small moments change her perspective. But she didn't know that this small act would lead to something far greater than she could imagine. an experience that would test her heart, her courage, and her belief in the power of tiny gestures. The next morning, Clara woke up with a flutter of nervous excitement. She remembered Daniel's words. One small act, one thing that brings someone else happiness. She made herself a cup of tea and thought about what she could do. As she walked to work, she noticed the usual scenes she often overlooked. The bus driver greeting everyone with a tired but genuine smile, a young mother juggling her toddler and groceries, the elderly man sitting alone on the bench near the library. Her heart tugged at her attention, asking her to notice, to act. When she reached the bus stop, she saw a teenager struggling to carry a heavy backpack while keeping a small sketchbook under one arm. Without overthinking, she stepped forward. "Here, let me help you with that," she said, lifting the backpack just enough for him to adjust his balance. The boy looked up startled, then smiled shyly. "Thanks. I was worried I'd drop my stuff." "You're welcome," Clara said, feeling a warmth in her chest she hadn't expected. It was small, simple, and yet it felt profound. Later that day, at work, she made an effort to genuinely ask her colleagues how they were doing, listening with full attention instead of nodding absent-mindedly. She left little notes of encouragement on a few desks, and even smiled at the security guard in the building lobby, who always seemed invisible to everyone else. By evening, Clara realized something. Daniel was right. Small acts mattered. They didn't have to be grand gestures. They only needed intention and care. And for the first time in months, Clara felt like she had some control over her own happiness, not by changing her circumstances, but by changing how she connected with the world. When she returned home, her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "How did it go?" Clara smiled, typing back, "Better than I imagined. I didn't think small things could feel this big." Daniel's reply came quickly. "Wait until you see what happens next. Sometimes one small act starts a chain reaction." Clara's curiosity deepened. She had no idea what he meant, but she trusted him. And that night, as she went to bed, she thought about all the overlooked moments that could now hold meaning, moments she could turn into something extraordinary. The following day, Clara decided to take it further. She volunteered at a local community center for an hour, helping organize donations. She smiled at strangers, offered a hand where needed, and noticed how each small interaction made her feel more alive. By midweek, something remarkable happened. One of the people she had helped, a young woman named Sophie, approached her in the park while feeding the ducks. "Hi," Sophie said nervously. "I just wanted to thank you. Last week, you helped me at the library when I dropped my books. That small thing, it actually helped me get through a rough day." Clara felt her chest tighten. "Really? I didn't realize it meant that much." "It did," Sophie said, her eyes bright. "And it made me want to help someone else too, just like you did." Clara smiled, stunned. One small act had already sparked another. She suddenly understood what Daniel had meant about chain reactions. Kindness, thoughtfulness, and attention could ripple outward in ways she had never imagined. That evening, she met Daniel again at the cafe. He was smiling, as if he had been waiting for her revelation. "You see," he asked gently, "it's not just about changing your own mindset. When you act with care, it spreads. You might not see it immediately, but it does, and sometimes it comes back to you in the most unexpected ways." Clara nodded, feeling a new sense of purpose. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about grand gestures or recognition. It was about noticing the small opportunities to make a difference and daring to take them. But just as she was about to leave the cafe, Daniel's expression changed. His smile faltered, and his voice grew serious. "Clara, there's one more thing I need to show you, something that might challenge everything you think you know about yourself." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. What could be more transformative than what she had already experienced? And in that moment, she realized that her journey was far from over. The small acts were only the beginning. Something bigger was waiting, something that could reshape not just how she saw the world, but how she felt about herself. Clara could hardly sleep that night. Daniel's words echoed in her mind. something that might challenge everything you think you know about yourself. She wondered what he could possibly mean. The next morning, she found herself at the same cafe, nervously stirring her coffee. Daniel arrived shortly after, his usual calm demeanor tinged with a rare intensity. "Clara," he began, "there's someone I want you to meet, someone who will show you a side of life most people never see." Curiosity and apprehension swirled inside her. She followed him through quiet streets, past familiar neighborhoods, until they reached a small community garden tucked behind a row of old brick buildings. It was peaceful, a hidden oasis in the middle of the city. At the center of the garden stood an elderly woman, tending to a patch of vibrant flowers. She looked up as they approached, her eyes bright and welcoming. "This is Mrs. Bennet," Daniel said softly. "She's been running this garden for decades, and she has a story that will probably change the way you see life." Clara stepped closer, intrigued. Mrs. Bennet smiled warmly and gestured for her to sit on a nearby bench. "You've been helping people, haven't you?" Mrs. Bennet asked, her voice gentle but firm. "Even the smallest acts have power. But there's something I want to show you, something that will test how much you've really embraced kindness." Clara frowned slightly. "Test me?" "Yes," Mrs. Bennet replied, nodding. "Sometimes the real change doesn't come from what we give to others. It comes from what we face in ourselves." Daniel stayed quiet, letting Clara absorb the words. Mrs. Bennet handed her a small watering can, then pointed toward a withered corner of the garden. "This patch has been struggling for months," she explained. "Many people have tried to bring it back to life, but it seems impossible. I want you to try." But she persisted, remembering Daniel's lessons about small gestures and the ripple effect of kindness. As the afternoon sun warmed her back, something remarkable happened. Tiny green shoots began to push through the soil. Clara felt a surge of hope and pride. One small act, done with intention, was already producing life where there had been none. Mrs. Bennet watched silently, then finally spoke. "See? Sometimes the world doesn't change overnight. Sometimes change comes in ways we can barely notice at first. But with patience and care, even the most difficult things can flourish." The air smelled of fresh earth and blooming flowers, and Clara realized that her world had shifted in ways she hadn't anticipated. Yet, just as she was starting to feel completely at peace, Mrs. Bennet paused and looked at her seriously. "One more thing, Clara," she said. "There's someone in your life who will need you soon, and the choice you make in that moment will show whether you've truly embraced everything you've learned." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know what the future held, but she sensed that her journey was about to take a deeply personal turn, one that would test not just her actions, but her heart. The following week, Clara went about her days with a quiet confidence she hadn't felt in months. Daniel's lessons, Mrs. Bennet's guidance, and the small acts of kindness she had embraced were slowly reshaping her perspective. Life felt lighter, more meaningful, as if every moment had the potential to ripple outward. Then, one evening, she received an unexpected call from Sophie, the young woman she had helped at the library. Her voice trembled slightly as she explained her situation. Her mother was ill, and she didn't know how to manage both work and care for her. Clara felt a pang of concern and quickly offered to help. That night, as Clara drove to Sophie's house, she thought of Mrs. Bennet's words. "The choice you make in that moment will show whether you've truly embraced everything you've learned." Her heart raced, but it wasn't fear. It was anticipation, the same feeling she had when she had first begun noticing small acts of kindness. At Sophie's home, she found the young woman exhausted, barely keeping herself together. Clara offered her support, helping with errands, preparing meals, and simply being there to listen. At first, it felt overwhelming. She wondered if she had taken on too much, if she was capable of making a real difference. But as the hours passed, she realized that every small gesture mattered. Each meal prepared, each comforting word, each moment of presence, it was like planting seeds of hope and resilience. And as she watched Sophie smile, even briefly, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. It wasn't just about helping someone else. It was about trusting herself, believing in the power of her own actions, and embracing the connections she had been avoiding. She had been drifting for so long, but now she felt anchored, grounded in purpose and compassion. Days turned into a week, and Sophie's mother began to recover slowly. The gratitude in Sophie's eyes, the warmth of her family's smiles, reminded Clara that her small acts had a tangible impact. She realized that life wasn't about waiting for grand opportunities. It was about noticing the moments where she could make a difference, no matter how small they seemed. When Clara returned home that evening, she found a note slipped under her door. It was from Daniel. "I'm proud of you. You've taken the lessons and lived them, not just for yourself, but for others. This is the kind of change that matters, the kind that creates ripple effects far beyond what you can see." Clara smiled, tears forming in her eyes. She had started this journey feeling uncertain, anxious, and lost, but through the guidance of her cousin, the wisdom of Mrs. Bennet, and her own willingness to act, she had discovered a new way of living. She thought about all the moments that had brought her here, the old man with groceries, the ducks in the park, the tiny plants in the garden, Sophie's grateful smile. Each small act, each choice to notice and care, had built a bridge to something greater. That night, as she gazed out her window at the quiet city streets, Clara felt an overwhelming sense of peace. She understood now that life's true power lay not in dramatic changes, but in the consistent, mindful acts of kindness and attention that connected hearts and created meaning. She whispered softly to herself, almost like a promise, "I will never underestimate the small moments again." And in that promise, she found the courage to continue embracing life fully, aware that every choice, every gesture, could ripple outward and transform not just her world, but the lives of everyone around her. The journey that began with a simple story from her cousin had changed her mindset entirely. She had learned that life wasn't about perfection or grand gestures. It was about noticing, caring, and acting with intention. And in that quiet, powerful way, she discovered the beauty of living fully, the depth of human connection, and the courage to shape her own path. Clara smiled, feeling ready for whatever came next, knowing that the small acts she chose today could create a lifetime of meaningful change.